how is our modern day lifestyle, the way that we're living right now, separating children at the border, too much electronics, people looking at their screens, just our modern day life? How is this going to be affecting our descendants?
Well, let's take keeping kids, separating kids. My field is attachment research, where we study parent-child relationships. And there are 30 attachment researchers and myself that wrote an article when children would be separated at the border. And you can read that. If you go to my website, drdansiegel.com, you can find our multi-authored paper, very short paper, where basically what we did is summarize the research that shows that ripping children away from their attachment figures produces long-lasting effects on epigenetic modifications and on neural growth. And the way that neural growth is impeded is it blocks the growth of what's called neural integration. And the way the epigenetic changes happen is they are doing just what we've said. They make you vigilant for danger, so prone to being very intense in your reactivity, right? So the capacity for what's called self-regulation or emotion regulation is impeded by attachment ruptures like the ones the United States government has created. So that's very serious. Just read our paper, and we try to be very conservative about the science, but we're attachment researchers, so we've studied this kind of thing, and we just lay it out and just say, here's what the science shows. So that was one of the things you talked about. So there, yes, there would be epigenetic changes and brain modifications, and an impairment, what's called security of attachment. Then the second thing you asked about is looking at screens. So now you're talking about something that's a little different. Now you're talking about cultural evolution, which is the idea that within what's called the noosphere, the atmosphere of ideas, and culture is just basically, I shouldn't say just, but it's that can be viewed as the pattern of energy and information flow sharing within a society. That's what culture is. And those energy and information patterns are absorbed by the senses, sight, hearing, smell, taste, touch. And so a person is immersed in energy and information flow patterns, and those patterns shape the activity of the brain in the moment. And with repeated activation, they change the structure of the brain. So those adaptations to experience likely are involved in epigenetics. So far, the research is primarily on traumatic experiences, and I wouldn't call looking at a computer screen traumatizing. So I don't know if we could say it's changing epigenetic regulation. I mean, we don't know. It probably does in some way, but it's certainly going to be changing neural structure, the connections among the 100 billion neurons. How might it be changing it? Well, there's different research studies that look at different things, but one of the things is we're losing the experiences that children and adolescents and even adults have to have one-on-one direct communication within conversations and within nonverbal sharing of information. And so the way we create an image of the mind of another person is through these conversations and nonverbal communication patterns. So I am deeply concerned that the capacity for mind sight, that is knowing the mind of others and of oneself, is being made very thin in terms of the experiences that generate it by the screen focus of modern life. And you kind of see this, even just think about going in an elevator or standing in line at a store. Back in the day, you would talk to someone and say, hey, how you doing? Oh, it's raining. Oh, I have a roof leak. Oh my God, it's kind of been wild to be out in the rain, or whatever. Now everyone's like down on their screen. And it's not by accident that this happens. We have a conference at the end of April where we're bringing in people to talk about, Tristan Harris, for example, to talk about how social media was designed to capture people's interest in, what do you think about me? And how can I put up something to look a certain kind of way? So you have this feeling that since we're such a social creature, you really want to make sure you fit in and belong. And these platforms that are creating the noosphere, this shared idea of these screens, wasn't made that way by accident. And then part of the impact is to disconnect ourselves, to make us feel very separate. And I think it's that separate self, which is in modern culture, that if you see another person speaking in April is Paul Hawken, who wrote this beautiful book and led the Project Drawdown. what we're doing to the planet can in part be seen by how people have a vision of themselves as separate entities in the world. And that is basically destroying life on Earth. So it may seem like these are separate things, but planetary health and interpersonal relationships and personal sense of who you are all deeply interconnected processes.
Okay, so if we want to pass on healthy mindsets to our children and future generations, what do you recommend?
I recommend relationships with other people and the planet that deeply embrace the reality of our interconnected nature.
Beautiful.
That you're not just a me living in a body, and you're not just a we where you get rid of the importance of the body for sleeping it and exercising it and feeding it well and knowing the history of this body. So the way I like to say it is me plus we, both being maintained, equals MWE, M-W-E. And we as an integrated identity, I think can be a path forward for humanity and for life on Earth.
Wow, well stated. Thank you. Let's go back to inherited situations. What can we do to, you've touched on this briefly, what can we do to overcome what we've inherited, and how can we know if we even can overcome inherited trauma or illness?
I think the research is very clear. My field in attachment, we've shown that if you make sense of your life, you can overcome cross-generational patterns of trauma. We've shown that. Just look at the research on the adult attachment interview. So for us as attachment researchers, we deeply believe in the plasticity of the human mind, the neuroplasticity of the brain, and the capacity for healing relationships that happen at the level of the relationship you have with one's inner life and the relationship you have with other people. And I would add into that, not what the attachment world talks about, but I would add into it our relationship with nature. So if you say, well, what's the path forward? The path forward is to recognize this process called integration. Integration is where elements retain their differentiated nature while they're also being linked. So if I were raising a child today, or the kind of consulting I do with schools, or working with larger organizations, or working with governments, it's really all about how we cultivate integration. Internal integration you would call presence. A person is able to be present with an open, receptive awareness. I talk a lot about this in a book called Aware. What's integration in a one-on-one relationship, which I think the screens are keeping us from? It's where you recognize that you can connect with one person one-on-one, you differentiate and you link with kindness and compassion. Compassion builds on the circuitry of empathy and insight. Both those things are a part of this overall journey of integration. And then you say, well, how do I relate to the planet? That seems too big. It's quite simple. You realize you are a part of nature. It's an intra-nature integration. So you are not separate from nature. That tree outside your house, that tree outside your classroom, that tree outside your apartment, those trees are an extension of your body. And if we can start growing up the next generation to realize this interconnected nature of who we are, then we can make this world turn the direction toward integration and health.
Okay, wow, fantastic. We're getting low on time here, but before we go any further, I want to make sure that I give the URL for your websites. You've already mentioned one, drdansiegel.com, and you've also got mindsightinstitute.com.
Yes.
So if our viewers would like to connect, which would be the best place to do that?
Probably the Dr. Dan, D-R-D-A-N, Dr. Dan, and then Siegel, S-I-E-G-E-L.com is probably the best way to go, because then you can get to events like the April meeting, or you can get to resources, which like the Wheel of Awareness that's there, or when you can click through there to the online courses and other things that are embedded in the Mindsight Institute website. But they're basically interconnected websites. They're integrated.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. Wow, this has just been a mind-boggling conversation. Thank you so much for that. Yeah, before
Oh,
we
you're
wrap
welcome.
it up, is there anything that we haven't covered that you want to make sure that we talk about? Anything I haven't asked you about?
I think the shift in where we need to go as a humanity, and I see the hands holding the globe behind you, is toward this we identity.
Mhm.
And, there are so many groups doing so many different things, and it's a beautiful thing. In Project Drawdown, Paul Hawkins shows the so many things people are actually doing to try to turn climate change around and reduce global warming and reduce our carbon imprint down to draw it down. We are at this time now where if we don't work together in various ways, it's not going to work out. There's an urgency to this. And the good news is that this is a time not of going from denial to despair, but actually resting in seeing these challenges of the volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous world, this VUCA world we're in, to see this as an invitation with lots of opportunities to change the way humanity has placed itself on Earth. It's an invitation to grow, to integrate, and to realize we're not a me alone in isolation. We're not a we without an internal experience. We're a we. And together we can make this a more integrated planet for the benefit of all living beings.